Aloha, everyone. So, in case you missed it over the weekend, it's been reported that we have some more drama in Maui politics, as Maui's former chief of staff just sued Mayor Richard Bissen and the County of Maui. The lawsuit accused them of grant fraud inside the mayor's own office, a cover-up, then retaliation, and a wrongful termination. Now, a lot of the news clips that you're seeing on TV aren't telling the full story. So I've read the entire 26-page lawsuit, and in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into the details. Now, before we get started, let's be clear that at this point, these are just allegations. This is a civil lawsuit, and the mayor's office has denied the claims. But the details in this filing are specific. They are documented, and I think the public deserves to know what it is because it's quite the story. So I'm going to walk you through just the facts and let you decide what you think is actually going on here. I'm going to keep my personal opinions out of it as we cover the lawsuit. But if you want to know what I actually think about all of this, stick around to the end of the video because I will share my opinions for anyone that's interested in hearing it. Okay, let's dig into the details of the lawsuit. Okay, this is the actual complaint, and it was filed this past Friday, April 24th, 2026. The plaintiff is Maui's former chief of staff, Leo Kaires, and the defendant is the County of Maui. Jumping down to paragraph 10, it says that Mr. Kaires was born and raised in Maui and deeply cares for the community. Paragraphs 11 through 17 describe how Mayor Bissen personally recruited Kaires. The two talked nearly every weekend before the election, and after Bissen won, he asked Kaires to join his administration. Kaires was then sworn in as chief of staff in January of 2023. Prior to his appointment, Kaires worked as a commercial banking officer at First Hawaiian Bank, and he owned his own business. He initially declined the offer to join the administration because he had a well-paying job, but ultimately agreed to leave to serve as chief of staff. Paragraphs 19 through 21 cover his educational background: a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wyoming and an MBA and a doctorate in education with a dissertation focused on the financial literacy of Native Hawaiians, as well as prior work with the Federal Small Business Administration and the U.S. Census Bureau. That's a pretty impressive background. In fact, paragraph 22 discusses how his background gave him a unique understanding of financial agreements and monetary transactions with financial institutions, which eventually led him to investigate potentially fraudulent activities regarding grants provided by the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, which the entire lawsuit simply refers to as OED. Paragraphs 23 and 24 outline his day-to-day responsibilities, overseeing staff, policy initiatives, budget planning, and attending high-profile events on the mayor's behalf, including meetings with the governors, U.S. senators, and military leadership. So this was a guy that Mayor Bissen clearly trusted. It goes on to say that Mayor Bissen relied on Kaires to watch out for potential problems. In his own words, he called it watching his six. And paragraph 28 says that during his entire tenure as chief of staff, his personal file shows that he was never reprimanded and never received a negative performance review. Okay, now we get into the heart of the lawsuit in paragraphs 29 through 45. In March of 2024, the Department of Corporation Counsel flagged suspicious activity involving an OED grant, which was awarded to a grantee identified only as AVS. Kaires reviewed the file and found a suspicious invoice for more than $45,000 from a company called RTFEX Depot. There were also unverifiable financial transactions connected to Mayor Bissen's executive assistant, who is referred to as MA throughout the lawsuit. Kaires did what any good investigator would do. He called the phone number on the invoice, and it went to a generic voicemail that didn't even mention the company name. He searched the internet, and he couldn't find the company. He called the Arizona Corporation Commission, and he was told that none of the information on the invoice was registered to any address in Arizona. His conclusion: MA and the grant recipient likely submitted false cashier checks that were made out to a fake company. So the Corporation Counsel agreed that a formal investigation was the next step. When Kaires confronted MA, He said he picked up the equipment from an unidentified third party in a Target parking lot in Kahului. MA couldn't produce bank statements or packing slips to verify anything. Most notably, paragraph 63 says that MA told Kaires he had already spoken with Mayor Bissen about his involvement and said, now this is quoting directly, that I talked to the boss already and I thought this was done. From here, Kaires reported the investigation to Mayor Bissen on March 15th, and then on March 19th, Kaires drafted a formal notice of interview for an internal investigation into MA. When he gave Mayor Bissen a copy, Bissen appeared agitated and wanted nothing to do with it. Then on April 30th, Mayor Bissen called Kaires at home and ordered him to stop the investigation entirely. When Mr. Kaires got off the phone, he realized that he was being directed by Mayor Bissen to ignore illegal activity in the workplace. And then it gets really juicy in paragraph 118, where it says that after a cabinet meeting where the investigation came up, a corporation counsel attorney privately told Kaires he should consider getting his own attorney for retaliation against him. From there, Kaires dug in even deeper and discovered that MA had actually received funds from a second OED grant as well. He also discovered that the OED director herself appeared to be directing grants toward businesses connected to her own family. And now we get into the retaliation part of the lawsuit. Starting in April of 2024, Kaires' duties as chief of staff were steadily stripped away from him. In May of 2024, Bissen told Kaires that the chief of staff position was being eliminated for budget reasons and offered him a demotion to the energy commissioner. Kaires accepted because he needed to support his family, so on October 1st, 2024, he was officially demoted. Shortly thereafter, though, Mayor Bissen promoted someone else to chief of staff, so the position was never really eliminated. On December 23rd, the day he returned from an approved medical leave, he found his termination letter on his desk. Prior to that letter, he had never once been reprimanded or given a negative performance review. The lawsuit also notes that Mayor Bissen allegedly asked Kaires what it would take to get him to resign, which the suit characterizes as an attempt to bribe. And as the last piece to the puzzle, after Kaires was terminated, a fraud risk assessment submitted to the county auditor found that the county's existing controls are not adequate to mitigate likely fraud risks. The lawsuit states that much of what that report identified aligns directly with what Kaires had been raising all along. Okay, so that's what the lawsuit says. I'll share a link to this document in the description in case you want to read through it yourself. Now, here's what I think about all of this. First of all, I think it's important to remember that these are still just allegations. From here, the county will respond. There will be discovery, and it's likely that a judge or jury will ultimately decide. And Mayor Bissen's office has called all these claims inaccurate, so I think it's too soon for anyone to place judgment. But at the very least, this is clear evidence of dysfunction within the current county administration. Mr. Kaires was at one point a friend of Mayor Bissen and a trusted ally, but that relationship has clearly degraded over time to the point where they're now adversaries. And I think it's also worth stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, because this lawsuit does not exist in isolation. Keep in mind that this is a mayor who approved a salary increase for himself of more than 50%. And that's while Maui was still recovering from the Lahaina fire, which was the deadliest American wildfire in over a century. Now, it's not fair to blame the current administration for the fire itself, but it is fair to scrutinize the response. Most people have already formed their own opinions on the fire response, but the fact of the matter is that the commercial portion of Front Street in Lahaina is still closed to the public, and rebuilding in that area has not even started nearly 3 years after the fire. In addition to this is an administration that's pushing through a controversial Bill 9 that aims to phase out half of the island's short-term rentals, which some people argue will cripple Maui's economy. The county's attorneys are already actively defending Bill 9 from multiple lawsuits, and that is already costing Maui taxpayers real money, even if the controversial policy is overturned in the courts. Now, add on the lawsuit alleging fraud that we just covered in this video. That's more taxpayer money spent on legal fees defending the mayor's actions. In fact, news sources say that the county council has already pre-approved $350,000 in outside legal fees just to prepare a response before a single hearing that was held on this one lawsuit. I can't even imagine how much the legal fees will be for all of these lawsuits combined. So what I see, regardless of how this lawsuit ultimately resolves, whether the allegations are true or false, this is a clear pattern of dysfunction within the administration. These aren't just allegations from one lawsuit, they're documented findings from multiple independent sources. Now, personally, I think the people of Maui deserve better. They deserve an administration that is fully focused on serving the entire community, not just focused on enriching themselves, and certainly not on pushing potential harmful agendas that half the community doesn't agree with, and that will be very expensive to defend in the courts at the very least. With that being said, this is an election year for the mayor's office, so the community will have an opportunity to decide if we want to continue on our current path or if we want to vote in new leadership. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section. I really am curious to hear what everyone is thinking about this. Now, I will be following this case and all the other issues on Maui closely and reporting back as things develop, so subscribe to the channel for future updates. Don't forget to hit the like button if you appreciate the detailed coverage, and share the video with anyone else you know who also deserves to know what is really happening on Maui.